Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Level 1 training this week. This is for research training, but also research support. And this is for early career researchers. Although, you may find some helpful points to just kind of refresh you or update you on certain methodologies if you are, in fact, a mid career researcher, which is what we do every other week. So, today I wanted to just do a quick recording. We'll see if anybody's able to join us in real time. But I wanted to address some comments that I got recently from actually a couple of different individuals about knowing when to say yes to a project, when to pursue, a certain project, and when to kind of let it go or kind of fall back a little bit. And so I wanted to really quickly talk through branding. And that's something that I think is not really discussed much when you're in training, but is a really critical part of building your career as a researcher and actually becoming known for a specific topic or phenomenon, such that you are called upon to speak or collaborate or in any other way kind of represent your knowledge in that area. So I want to share screens and I'm going to show you a kind of a quick trick to determine whether or not you've already started forming a brand. Um, and actually, before I do that, the reason this matters is because when you're a nurse researcher, there are not many nurses who do research. And so, because of that, you're in pretty high demand. And you've often had specific training in methodologies or engagement strategies that other people don't have. And so, you'll be asked to participate in activities that, while they are compelling and important and interesting, they may not actually be connected to where you want to go in your specific career. You should really think about your time as a nurse researcher along a trajectory, right? Where you have, and I did a video about this earlier, so you can kind of go back and look at one of the first videos, but this idea where you start with a research question or, some inquiry around a specific population or experience or phenomenon, right? And then from that question, you kind of begin your exploration to understand, is there sufficient literature already? Is there a gap? If there isn't a gap, is this something that I'm still seeing as a problem in clinical practice and maybe requires some sort of quality improvement or performance improvement project? If there is a knowledge gap, then is this something that we need to take back to the fact that maybe the conceptual models aren't right? And we need to really start with foundational work before we start to do implementation studies and examine different factors, right? How do we even choose those factors, right? So there's a lot going on here. It all starts with a question, but in general, you're doing tons of work in the service of answering this specific question. Now, the question may grow and change, but to maintain a fairly consistent, predictable, expected, exponentially growing research trajectory that really secures your spot as an expert in this space, these things should be fairly linear and they should be connected, right? So if when I started off, I was looking at diabetes and I was really interested in diabetes, and then I was asked to work on a cancer project, okay, maybe. Maybe it's the same population, or maybe somehow diabetes is connected to that particular cancer. Okay, maybe. But then they asked me to start looking at I don't know, housing disparities for people with cancer. And I start going further and further and further into this space. And then a random person says, hey, I have this project about electrocution and that sort of burn recovery. Can you do something like that? Right. Very quickly, my trajectory starts to kind of fragment. And suddenly I've put in all of this work, but it hasn't actually moved me along this timeline. Hasn't moved me along the timeline in terms of my career, right? I'm not being recognized as an expert because I'm putting out important product after product, either paper, abstract, talk that's really moving the science forward in that space. Or it's not really allowing me to uncover knowledge that nobody else could uncover because they have this trajectory that's backing them up, right? So there's multiple ways that this fragmentation really slows you down in terms of this trajectory. But sometimes maybe I start talking about, doing studies with diabetes, and then they ask me to do this other aspect of cancer diagnosis, which was related to diabetes. And then they asked me to do something about eye care, which seems unrelated, but actually is connected to retinopathy, right? Sometimes there are very, I would say, obscure or opaque threads of continuity in all of your projects. It doesn't look like a straight shot. I'm not doing like blood sugar work and then, diet and exercise and then, whatever, medication adherence for diabetes. Like it's not super straight like you would expect your trajectory to be. But there becomes kind of this connected constellation of related topics and, as a consequence, topical expertise that I have that still maintains that along this continuum, I am a diabetes researcher, right? So again, it's not always going to be perfectly linear, but if you go too far afield, you pick up any project that sounds interesting, you're not thinking about the primary question that you started with and building on that, kind of building the science and the background for this future work, you can get stuck as a researcher. And I've talked to some people lately, that's actually why I'm doing this talk, where they had projects that they didn't quite finish and now they're moving on to the next one, and they're deciding, is it worth it to go back and finish that other project? And by finish, we mean closing the scientific process loop, which is dissemination, right? Writing the paper, writing the abstract, giving the talk, doing something like, creating a book chapter. The point is that if you never close the loop with dissemination, then you never actually drop pins in this line from which you can say, is this constellation a big spider web of things? Is it totally unrelated points? But you also may kind of deprive yourself of the ability to recognize, how was this one obscure project that I did as an undergrad, even then, changing my brain, directing it to notice certain things about this phenomenon that coincidentally I looked at as my DNP project, right? You got to give yourself that opportunity to have an expansive view of your work and your intention and your interests. And it's possible that there are some of those very obscure threads that exist. So I know this might all sound like a big ask to think about things in those terms, but I do have a quick technique to check and see, to just kind of take the quick temperature of where you are in terms of actually building a trajectory that is visible, somewhat obvious, not too obscure, but also really is in alignment with what you're interested in and where you want to go as a researcher over the next 5 to 10 years. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you kind of this quick technique. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, no problem. It's something that I just kind of came up with in the last couple of days based on these conversations, but we'll see how it works. We're going to try it out together in real time. And since I am a scientist, I don't mind us falling flat and having a terrible outcome, because any data is data. So let's see together if it works. So I am going to share my screen. I should be sharing now. And I'm going to take you over to my CV. So everybody has kind of their CV that keeps track of all of their projects. You should have publications, things that have already been accepted in review in pre-preparation, and then additional things like book chapters, and then just abstracts that you did either a poster or a podium presentation about. So I took this information and I copy and pasted it onto an additional document, which you see right here. And I took out all of the extraneous information except for the title, right? So if you look at this one, Secret Self-Management Loop, it doesn't have the other authors' names. It doesn't have the date. It doesn't have the journal. It is just a title, and that's it. And I did that for all of my publications or presentations or anything since 2019, right? Because 2019 to now gives me a good, 2+ year chunk of what does my research trajectory look like. If I was to include things from further back, this may look a little different, but for now, this is fine, especially since we're not sure if it's going to work. So you'll see I am going to copy all of these words, and then I'm going to take them over to just this random free word cloud generator, because I want to know, if I took all of these titles and I dropped them in, which I'm about to do, are they going to look like what I think people think I do for a living? So let's try. And here we go. The big things that jump out are burnout. Of course, there's the stakeholders, patients, adults, Latinx, right? Diabetes is in there, pandemic is in there, probably mental health. Let's see, model is in there. I would say that if people were to ask me what I do generally, I would say that I care a lot about care delivery in Latinx communities and care delivery specifically, how it's influenced by provider burnout, and how that affects care delivery specifically for diabetes, right? So all of these things are kind of picked up in there. Like most scientists over the last year, many of my publications have reflected the pandemic in some way. I would say that I have expertise in qualitative methodology, which is showing up in there. The population that I work with, older, Latinx, underserved, all of that is kind of popping up as well. And care delivery, you kind of see all of the stuff that I normally do. Again, Latinas, Latinos, so that Latinx should probably be much bigger. You can manipulate this word cloud a little bit, get rid of some redundant words or repeated words that are actually kind of conceptually similar and see what happens with that. But this really does kind of sum up what I would say I'm able to speak about as a researcher and a scientist. So I'm happy to see that, because sometimes if we go back to this list, some of the things kind of go a little far afield from that. For example, the health influencer model, leveraging social media as health educators, right? Social media influencers as health educators, not necessarily straightforward, right? Influenza vaccine uptake again, but of course, the Latinx is in there. So from this vision of the work that I'm doing, it's not as many kind of one-offs, weird outliers as I expected to see. And I would say that this is a pretty good sum. I'm actually going to take a screenshot because I think I'm going to put this on my wall. I'd say this is a pretty good sum of what I'm interested in as a researcher. So that tells me that I'm probably going down the right path. So let's go back to the CV. Oh, actually, you're not going to see this because it's not a bio sketch, but let me see if I can find a bio sketch real quick. And of course, we changed the bio sketches, based on the submission, so they don't always totally line up. But let's look at this most recent bio sketch. Again, it says, I'm a doctorally prepared Latina registered nurse and graduate of NCSP, right? My long-term goal is to maintain research independence, advancing health equity for chronic illness among racial ethnic minority adults via improved care delivery in health professional shortage areas. That's basically what that word cloud said. It also says that I'm building on dissertation findings connecting provider burnout and depersonalized care to treatment adherence and safety net settings, right? So that word cloud, based on just the titles of things that I've done, are sufficiently connected to this personal statement that I could, in theory, just take that and drop it right in here and it would still line up. So that's good to know, I guess. And I'd be interested in knowing if other people had a similar experience. Try to use the word cloud, take your current information, drop it in, and say, does this visual representation make sense in terms of who I am right now as a researcher and where I want to go? If you do this word cloud and it is all over the place, then it's a good time to ask yourself, am I being as focused as I want to be about the brand that I create as a researcher? I think that can be really helpful for you, because not only does it get you recognition and it increases your ability to collaborate with others, it's financially lucrative to be known as an expert. You're often called in to participate in things that do add to your compensation. But you're also called in as an expert to just collaborate on larger projects than maybe you could create or support on your own. So that's where we are with that. I'm going to stop recording because it looks like Uzo dropped in, but thank you for watching. If you have a topic that you'd like me to cover, let me know. Like I said, this one came from 2 discussions that I had this week. So I'm always open to directly respond to questions that come in. But otherwise, I hope everybody's doing well, and thanks for watching.